Revealed in some of the new documentaries, the Ultimate Warrior and Jake the Snake were supposed to have a feud and maybe even fighting over the World Wrestling Heavyweight Championship, but it never happened. All we know is they were on a collision course. The Ultimate Warrior was on top, and Jake the Snake Roberts was a mysterious man dealing with the dark side. They were some of the first cinematic vignettes that wrestling had seen. And then it went away. Warrior got fired, and not long after that, Jake the Snake was even gone. But what could have happened? Could this feud have changed wrestling history? We find out on today's show. Welcome to Rebooking the Territory podcast. This is your host, Luke Thayer. This is the podcast, where we go back and take storylines, wrestlers' careers, maybe just a particular match, and rewrite them the way we wish they had gone in the past. My guest this week, he's a returning guest to the show. Very funny man. He's been seen on The Tonight Show. He's written for The Tonight Show. He has also written for the WWE, which gives him a lot of credentials about what we're going to be talking about. If we were in the live setting, I'd be saying, put your hands together, but in your own homes, at the gym, wherever you are right now, put your hands together for Jon Rineman.
Oh, thank you, everybody. Thanks for having me again,
Absolutely. Luke. Yeah, it's great to have you on the show again. And we have like a kind of an interesting topic this week. We don't have to talk about your wrestling history, because if they want to hear that, they'll go back and listen to the WrestleMania 8 podcast, and they can get some of your wrestling history. But I do think that we both have some history with the topic today, which we're going to be talking about two awesome characters in the early 90s, late 80s, but two of my personal favorites. You can't and they're on my shirt right now. You can't, obviously, if you're listening to podcasts, you can't hear them. I'll kind of point down for John to see. But Ultimate Warrior and Jake Roberts, we're going to be kind of rebooking the feud that didn't happen.
Yeah, the program that wasn't. The great, probably, man, I would say one of the, probably at that time, in terms of just vignettes, which is so interesting because the vignette master, Bruce Pritchard, was as he was on his quote unquote sabbatical at the time. And so it was a lot of Vince involved in that. And Jake, creatively, but some of the best build-up vignettes for any program ever. And it was a great misdirect. But as we know, business happened and it didn't. So we have this great childhood memory. It's almost like the Mandela effect,
Yes.
where it's like we remember, but it really did happen. They really did have set up a great Warrior Jake Roberts program. And, but, it went away.
Well, that's what's so great about this is that we speak of the Mandela effect. It is something where, if you guys listening don't know what the Mandela effect is, which, by the way, I assume on your podcast, John is the co-host or the tag team partner of the Here's What People Are Talking About podcast. Yeah. Have you done an episode on the Mandela effect?
No, I mean, our thing is just our podcast was just, I teach. I'm going back again at Emerson College. Because when you're in development, you just have time to go do that. It's fun, and it's really cool to just kind of take a different role. And one of the things I found was that they're really good students, and they a lot of times just want to hear stories. And we didn't have time for that this year because of COVID restrictions. So one of my former students who was getting ready to be a podcast host, and he was always one that would come to office hours and say, "Hey, can you tell me about, for instance, like when The Undertaker came on Fallon, or can you tell me about like what sharing an office with Anthony Jeselnik was like?" And so I'm a big fan of obviously everything Conrad Thompson does. I love the 2-man canoe they have kind of going, and Bruce's is my favorite. And I said, why don't we just do like that and just go for an hour and just pretend like you'd ask, because I'm not going to have time to do that with the kids this year. Every minute counts, and we have to teach every minute. And so it's just more about late night and working in late night and some stand up and a little bit of wrestling, but just from places I worked. And we pick topics, and here's what people are talking about, because that's how we used to open the monologue when I was at Fallon. And it's on all the platforms.
So you get all the platforms, and even the reason I even asked, like, if you had done, maybe I was being a little too specific with saying an episode on the Mandela effect.
Well, someone I worked with, Mike DeCenzo, is a big believer in that stuff. His big thing is the Berenstain Bears. That's his
He
That's when
genuinely believes like
he
multiple
thinks we
universes.
split timelines somewhere.
Yeah.
And
Which,
it's like, I used to just be like, whatever. But man, after the last, 3 years or whatever that we've all had, I'm just like, well,
well, maybe it's
it's
true.
as good as explanation as I got. Yeah, sure.
Right. That's the thing for those of you that do not know out there. The Mandela effect is when we collectively, or a group of people collectively, remember something that did not happen,
Mm-hmm.
at least in our timeline or our dimension. So a case in point would be the Berenstain Bears. Everybody thinks they're the Berenstain Bears, and it didn't happen. Another one is um, a movie with Sinbad
Mm.
where he's a genie. And
Now I know that's not true because I know that was Shaq playing the rapping genie
that
because
was
I'm a
Shaq.
big basketball fan, so I know that's one that when people bring that up, I go, I'm not with you on that one.
Yes.
But Berenstain, that was the one that got me to go, hmm? And then every now and then there'll be a news story. The other one that I swear has happened 4 times, and each time everyone's like, "That's crazy," is about Olivia Newton-John's ex-husband, like
Mm-hmm.
faking his death. That's happened like 4 times, and everyone always acts shocked. I'm like, I know I wrote jokes for Jay Leno and Jimmy Fallon about that story, and I know I did. But this is a fun topic because this Ultimate Warrior Jake Roberts thing, it really is. That's what happens in wrestling is that we are remembering something that never ended up happening. Right when we were getting to the like, oh, here we go, Warrior was gone, and then Jake was on to Randy Savage, and that became a legendary feud. So this is kind of fun. Like it's like we're actually in, this is a real Mandela effect thing where it's like they did this, they made this. You can find it on YouTube. Some of the best vignettes ever with Jake. It's in your background. Jake Roberts taking the Warrior to the dark side to get him tougher to fight the Undertaker, and it never delivered. We always were
Never.
just left to wonder what was going to happen, and they've always kept it very quiet.
Yes. And so we'll move away from the Mandela effect for a second and talk about the actual reality of everything. Uh, Ultimate Warrior, I have a complicated history with him because I was a Hulk Hogan fan.
Mm-hmm.
And WrestleMania 6 was kind of my entry point into wrestling. And so since I was a Hulk guy, as against Warrior, I, as a kid, needed to root for Warrior to some degree because he was a baby face. He's who all the kids, all my friends liked. But I also, it's very hard for me to get over him beating Hogan for that championship. And so that's my
Great match, though.
complicated.
Great match, though.
My favorite match all
Maybe
time.
if they're both of their career, probably both their careers, best match. I don't know though. I would say Warrior Savage was great too at WrestleMania 7. But
That's great too. Yeah,
the Sky Dome WrestleMania 6 match, classic match, and it was
classic
just great
match.
too because we all know the difficulties those two had, but they that night were clicking and did business, and it was that's what happened. That's a great lesson about wrestling can teach you so much, and we all have such an important memory for any wrestling fan of that era, that
Mm-hmm.
match, and it's a good like metaphor for life in that these two guys who really didn't click, didn't quite get along, didn't see eye to eye, but they played ball and they did business, and they each gave it all they had that night, and it was a really organic, emotional, believable finish and everything, and close, and no one it's like both got over that night. Bret Hart likes to say that people have their eyes on you when you lose, because that's how he went from the IC championship to the heavyweight championship. And I think in a weird way, in that moment, when we know both guys had their drama down the road individually, but in that moment, Warrior got over as the winner, and Hogan got over for the first time as a graceful loser, and it told a wonderful story. And everyone seems to have. I won't get into Roddy Piper's situation. God bless, God rest his soul, God bless his soul. But other than him, who got the really ribbed that night, everyone talks about WrestleMania 6 with just like, man, what a blast. And I think Warrior was going to be it makes sense when you look at the 90s and the style of the 90s. Hogan was, as we know, the 80s guy for the WWF. That was Vince's 80s guy. And then if you look at the 90s, where everything was a little bit more literally more colorful and more neon, I would say. And things
literally neon. Yeah.
Yes. And things were getting a little more like flashy and kind of weird and fun and cartoon. Warrior made sense as you're like, okay, this is going to be your Hulk of the 90s. And, I think that when people talk about it now, it's so interesting because, look, there's so many people in the business who were there with him and worked with him, or they were older, and then younger people who are like the smart marks who kind of just didn't really see him. But like I remember I never got to see him in person, but I remember watching him on TV. I remember talking about it at school. He was more over than Hogan, like on my playground at least. I mean, it was like
for sure.
Everyone wanted to be the Ultimate Warrior. Everyone loved face paint. Everyone loved the colors. That theme music was just everything. And so this myth that's been created, that the legend in his own mind quote, because I know Vince said that in a heated moment, but that wasn't true. Like he was, maybe to those guys, they were like, we're not seeing it. But if you came and talked, it's like I say to late night people, if you go talk to your demo, if you go talk to the fans that you never listen, you don't talk to, you're only looking at parents and stuff. We loved Ultimate Warrior. And so it was weird, man. I mean, he just vanished after SummerSlam.
It was so bizarre to have him just disappear. Now, this was a little different era where we didn't always see the top stars every week to begin with.
Yes.
And so sometimes, and there was only, 4 pay-per-views around that time. So
golden era, man. That was great. It was like
right.
3 sports seasons or 4 sports seasons a year, building each pay-per-view is great.
It's, I think that's the unfortunate, there's pluses and minuses to everything.
Yes.
But one of the unfortunate things about modern wrestling is it's a little too much, so it dilutes the importance of every single thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of, and then there's a lot of, as they say, giving away a pay-per-view match.
Right.
And that just happened. I mean, I don't know when, that happened with a Hell in a Cell. Hell in a Cell this year is that they put a match on SmackDown that was supposed to be in Hell in a Cell.
Yeah.
And that made a lot of people very upset. That was a tough business decision. Mm-hmm. And look, no one I worked with is really still there. It's so funny. I talked to someone recently who's going to work there, and I said, "Oh, who'd you interview with?" And they didn't talk to one person I know because he was unavailable, or 2 people. Bruce and Ed Koski were both too busy, understandable, both busy. But I didn't know a single name they brought up, really, except for one, which wasn't surprised. I won't talk about, but everyone else, good, bad, in the thumbs up, or Meltzer would say up, down, in the middle. I didn't know the names. A lot's happened in 2 years, or 3, or 2 years, I guess it's been. But they. I don't know what their thinking was. I don't know if someone had an issue that Sunday, or an injury that they were worried was going to blow up overnight or whatever. But yeah, it's tricky because you're trying to keep your pay-per-view sacred, so people go to Peacock and get that. But at the same time, the television ratings are just taking a hit, and it's a real weird. On paper, it doesn't make sense. They have such a deep roster, and some bright minds there, and it's just the imbalancing act of trying to keep up with network TV, and also getting people to go get the streaming thing to watch your quote unquote pay-per-views. It's real hard. I mean, it's hard to be in 2 businesses at the same time, and I think that's what they're trying to do right now. They're trying to be both a TV show and a streamer, and it's like, that's hard. You're competing against yourself.
Yeah, and they've been doing it for years. The WWE Network up until Peacock was around for 5 years or so.
But it's getting tough, man. It's like everyone just watches everything on YouTube. So
the whole thing is it just lets you know exactly what today's wrestling is versus early 90s wrestling.
Yeah, like when you and I were watching it growing up, it was in I didn't mean to step on you there, but like what we were, you'd have your your four cornerstones. So you have your Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, Survivor Series, and
Mhm.
you'd have a 3 month build to each. Really, it was a little bit tighter between Rumble and Mania sometimes, but depending on where they were doing it. And SummerSlam, because I think it was in summer and I was a kid, that always seemed to drag on forever. Like the
Yeah.
build to SummerSlam was like, oh my god, like the two Undertaker thing they did. I was like, are there going to be six? Because like that's the only thing that would impress me at this, And
Yeah.
that's we should come back if I do a third one. I want to do the two Undertakers because I love when Bruce talks about how he talked about it once at work, how when they got in the once he's like, as he says, then the bell rang, and
Yeah.
then they realized, wait, we don't have a pay, like this is just there's two Undertakers and the real one's gonna, what's the point of this? And he's like, well, we got to work with Leslie Nielsen. Like
Yeah.
Vince was like, god damn it, like, this is like what, like no one was cheering, people were they were all like, oh, there's the real Undertaker. All right,
Yeah.
well, see ya. Yeah, but yeah, you would watch every week on Saturday morning, and it was mostly enhancement talent against established stars. The most you'd ever see would be the Intercontinental Champion would appear because that was the working champion. Sometimes you'd see a challenger or a heel world champion appear. But as you're saying, Luke, you wouldn't see the Warrior. You wouldn't see Hulk Hogan.
Right.
So when one of those guys took a quiet leave, we just, for a week or two, we're like, he's never on Saturday morning. But
Right.
then the Warrior didn't come back. And it all of a sudden, it was just erased. And I remember there's all sorts of rumors about him. There's rumors that he went back to be a chiropractor. There was a rumor that he passed away. And
The one that he died is the one that was very prominent in my elementary school. He died, and then when he did
in
return, it's a different guy.
in mine, it was the went into private business. That was I didn't know. None of us believed he died thing because I used to go to, like, when I was at my mom, when I'd go to the grocery store, I'd always go to the grocery store and my mom, she'd be like, why do you want to come? I'm like, oh, just to help out. But it was really so I could go to the magazine section,
Yeah.
read Meltzer and Pro Wrestling Illustrated and all that stuff. And I knew I would have read in there if he had died. And even they were just like, we don't know what's going on. And I was like, well, so we all thought like he had gotten injured or had just retired. And, it was, but it didn't matter at the time. Like back then, even if you had a good exit, a peaceful exit, like Dusty Rhodes did, you'd disappear. They would just erase you. You would not be mentioned or brought up again. And I think Randy Savage is the only one in that time, in that era, that ever got like a farewell, a formal farewell. That's a very famous moment that I remember watching, and that my heart kind of sinking. That, like, when you realize it's not a work, that Vince is shooting and saying, Randy, we appreciate you and good luck. I was like, Randy's gone, but yeah, just totally vanished. And then we know now, years later, there was a business dispute between the chairman and the Warrior that came to a head at a SummerSlam, and I always thought it was blown out of proportion. But it sure seems like everyone's on the same page about what went down between these two guys. We've just had two documentaries about it and a whole lot of podcasts, it seems.
Yeah, they just we had so little information at one point in time, and now I feel like all we have is information. Is like every detail. One of the
Almost
documentaries,
every detail.
almost every
Yeah.
detail. I believe it might have been the Dark Side of the Ring episode about Ultimate, where they had the letter that Jim
Yes.
Hellwig had written out to
And
Vince McMahon.
A&E had it too, I think.
Yeah.
WWE, in fairness, I thought they were both good in different ways. I will admit, maybe I'm biased for certain reasons. I like the A&E one more because I kind of already knew I like Dark Side of the Ring a lot. I love those guys. Those guys that do it are great. And of course, I love Conrad when he interviews them. But like, I thought WWE's was, everyone kind of thought that was going to be just putting Warrior over. I thought that it was more honest and fair than people gave it credit for. I thought it came out great, and it was great to see Dana talk because I love her. She's a great person, and she was very honest and forthcoming, and I came away saying like, okay, I got something out of this. And it was like, it makes sense as like that war between Warrior and Vince. Man, that was the real behind the scenes. That was a real program that, like, that sounds more interesting than a lot of stuff you'd see on camera. And that those guys were going at each other for like a year, I guess. And it's kind of the original screw job. Like when you hear about it. No, really,
Yeah.
because like Vince caved and then fired. And then as he came, imagine that when you watch SummerSlam, I remember the image of Warrior chasing Mustafa and Adnan through the curtain with the chair.
Yeah.
And it made sense story wise to me because I was like, you're gonna need your story. Hogan's gonna go over. We all know that. That's to wrap up this angle here. You know, Sarge isn't gonna keep going with this. This is getting awful. He's getting death threats. So Hogan's gonna go over. He's gonna go over clean, and then your story is gonna be what happens between him and Sid. And so you got to get the Warrior out of there. And it was a very organic. Does the Warrior thing, takes a chair, chases the guys down the tunnel. But it's so interesting to think that while in the ring, Hogan and Sid are finally shaking hands and like, okay, backstage, there is this insanity going on that I'm like, I want to see that. Like that, like I kind of don't because it's so sad to think about, but like, gosh, like literally they said he still had this steel chair in his hand and Vince fired him.
Yeah.
coming
Pack your stuff.
And dude, hey man, I can't get into specifics, but I think, I mean, like we're both in comedy, so we've all had at least one instance where we've lost a gig somewhere along the line that was like, well, geez, the way that went down was crazy, but that's crazy. Like that's it was like I said, it was the original. It was almost like it was just out of view of being the original like screw job, really.
Yeah, for sure. You know, if it had been a one-on-one match, it might have just been a screw job out in the open.
It makes sense because I remember as a kid thinking, why do they have the Warrior in this program with Undertaker and now Jake? But he's teaming with Hogan. Right away, that should have raised a red flag. Like Warrior should have known. Okay, I'm not the and I maybe there was that's what we're gonna get into here is that like I'm thinking there had to have been a bluffed schmaz. There had to have been something where they told Warrior, all right, take, you know, Paul Bearer's going to come out with a coffin at some point, or Jake's going to come out at some point, and then you're going to run back. And then just call an audible or something. Because at that point, there's nothing Warrior can do. But if I'm Warrior and I'm going into Madison Square Garden, and I guess he was just, you know, he was shocked when he got fired. So he genuinely was like, not like, screw it, I don't care what happens. Like, he really thought he was just going to get his way. But if you're going in and you're not in a match with the guys you've been programmed with, and you're not involved in the finish, and you're not even in the arena at that point, a red flag has to go up somewhere that someone's, you know, so this is weird. Like, my guys I'm supposed to be working with aren't involved, aren't even on the card, and I'm in a match that I just that I'm taken out of, like, before they finish and go home. So it's kind of like, you know, yeah, we've all been there too. That thing where you look back and you're like, wow, I was full of myself. Like, I really thought this was going to work out. Because anyone that looks at that objectively now, I'm sure even Dana could look at it and say, dude, you're going to get, the minute you step back, something's going on here. Like, you're just on the card as a draw, and you have nothing to do with anything, and they have no creative lined up for you, except, as you just mentioned, Dark Side of the Ring, Jake the Snake Roberts made a pretty surprising. We knew they were programmed together, but he said something pretty surprising on Dark Side.
Yeah. Yeah. So just real quick, before, I don't want to gloss over this point, is just thinking about how Ultimate Warrior got fired in this instance. It's kind of interesting to think in all of this that Vince McMahon didn't just go, no, I'm not meeting these demands. These are ridiculous. Like, if you don't show up to SummerSlam, you'll be in breach of contract or whatever it is. But I'm going to draw the line in the sand here. This is the way we're going to do it. Rather than say yes to everything and then fire him to get him into SummerSlam just to be in this weird match. It wasn't like a big deal. It was just kind of like, yeah.
Well, at that point, because of, look, this may be controversial. I'm in the minority that I didn't mind the Sergeant Slaughter angle. I mind it from his personal standpoint and the safety of his family. I mind it for people who had family members or themselves were veterans. I get it. But you know, look at TV. And this is the argument Pritchard always made. I'm sorry. Well, it's true. Pritchard
Yeah.
and Russo and Heyman, even though they all, and Cornette, even all these guys, even though they all like hate each other and everything, they're all on the same side of this. And they're right, which is that, I mean, look at Homeland. There's a show called Homeland that came out, just a few years, not even a decade after 9/11. So it's like, that's what TV does. That's what movies do. So that's what wrestling is. And so I, watching it as a kid, was really captivated by it. Like, I was really like, there were some good heels that summer of 91.
Oh, they're
And,
great.
but
That's
like,
for
that
sure
that
not a
like
problem.
you had Jake and Taker, and then you had the Slaughter and his guys, and like even the Nasty Boys and the Mountie. Like, there were people. Mountie was still a serious character at the time, and it was like there were people that I was like, and Mountie Boss Man right off of Rodney King. Yeah, it's probably probably not the right take. That was a little brutal. I don't know. I don't that one. I think it's hard to defend, but the Slaughter one, it was like, that was what wrestling was. It was to get the American over, to get Hogan over, and we were at war. And so I think at the time, no one, people, it was kids. It was why, it was a way for us. They took advantage. Yeah, I get that. But compared to other stuff that's on TV and in film, I thought it was very like PG. Really, at the end of the day, I mean, they never burned. That's another Mandela thing. Is that Slaughter burned the flag? He did. He burned a Hulk Hogan T-shirt, but it had
Yeah.
the same effect as a kid, and you see that. And but the issue was that cost them a lot of business. A lot of people protested and boycotted because of that. They thought that was like the original PC sort of thing,
Yeah. Bad
and they were all caught
taste.
off. Yeah, and from Bruce talking and telling stories about it on this podcast, they were all kind of caught off guard. They didn't think they'd get the backlash that they would. They were really shocked that Slaughter got all the death threats and everything. Is because it was the first time in a 24-hour news cycle with CNN that they had tried to do a topical angle, and people got really mad. And that's how the Mountie got all his heat, and later on, and all that stuff. So it was more than they bargained for, but it cost them business. The buy rates were down for WrestleMania 7. They were hurting, and even though in our head they were still great. They were losing some money. They had to downsize their WrestleMania venue. They needed every dollar they could get out of SummerSlam 91, everything. And I think the reason Vince acquiesced there is just that their roster at the time was not what it is. You still had, at the time, it had become WCW. So it was like you had Warrior was your guy. He was your number 2 guy. And I did read that there were some plans about Savage would take his place on house shows and stuff. And they thought about trying to get him in, but like it was too quick. Then you would lose the marriage angle. And so Vince was just, as he admitted, he paid him the money. Like, people forget that. But Warrior did get paid, but he gave him the money, and then you're out of here. Like, it was basically like, okay, Jim, I'm going to give you the money, and we're going to do all of the creative things you want. Well, when you promise someone money, you owe them money. When it comes to just creative, as they say in Seinfeld, there are ideas. I'm just pulling them out of the air. Like, that's, it's plans change, pal, as Vince likes to say. And so Warrior buying a creative handshake promise, that's just, you can't do that in wrestling. The odds of you getting that, if it's 50-50, are pretty good. So I think Vince, the reason it is surprising, but Jeff Jarrett did the same thing in 1999. There's a few instances of that, and that's because they need the money, but also Vince has a thing where, for all his, any warts, or so to speak, he is a big believer in delivering what you advertise. He believes that it is terminal business, basically, to break your promises to your fans, and it's Madison Square Garden. So it's just like, it's a moment where he's going to say, I got to do what I got to do. Like, I can't lie to my fans. And I can tell you from working with him, that's his biggest pet peeve is people who no show. And, it's just show up. Even if you're hurt, if you're sick, even if you're Andre and you have to just stay in the corner until the finish, people just want to see you. They want to slap your back or whatever. And Vince knew that if he didn't, with them hurting at the time, that if Warrior was dropped from that card, they might sell out MSG, but there weren't going to be a lot of buys, because like I said, Warrior was over. Like, he was a draw. More of us in our age group want to see him than Hogan. And
yeah, well, it's not even so much
no choice.
The fact that he's on the card. I get it for sure. Mm-hmm. It's this, because anytime you have big star, top of the pyramid type of guy, and another one of those guys tag teaming, it always feels to me, and even when I was a kid, of a lesser match, because the stakes aren't there, because it's not going to be for a championship ever.
Exactly.
And so you don't have that stake. Yeah. And also, if they lose, they don't really lose. That, like, they've lost a tag team match and they're not tag team wrestlers. So it's like, that stake isn't there of like Hulk must win and Hogan must pose. It's like over a tag team match, and then it just there's too many bodies.
I remember as a kid, I was like, why is Warrior in this? He's out of this.
Right. He wasn't out of this. Yeah. And
also, it's like he had Slaughter beat at the Rumble. His beef's not with Slaughter. He's been with his Undertaker all these months.
Yeah.
So like I said, it just looking back, you're like, Vince had this all planned out all along. He's like, this is how I'm going to drop this guy. And he's like, he knew by Survivor Series he'd have Flair, and so he was just like, whatever. Like, do what we have to do with Jim to get through August 30th or whatever it was. And then, but I remember as a kid thinking, story-wise, is why are they doing this? Like, why isn't it like, shouldn't it be, I don't know what Hogan would do. I don't know, like, who he would partner with, but like, you'd think it would be Warrior Undertaker. Like, that was the blow off. Yeah.
And that should have been the headlining match of that. And, if Hogan did some sort of tag team thing against Sergeant Slaughter or Mustafa and Adnan, then they could have done something, whether it was, instead of Sid Justice as a referee, being in the match or something along those lines. But, obviously there was a reason they didn't do that, but it just real quick for the audience, I want to just read this card, because if this card could be recreated right now, people would first of all, it would sell out in like 6 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And people would be paying astronomical prices to go see this live event, which the opening match, which I believe is a dark match, Coco Beware versus Kato. Throw that away. Although Coco Beware was kind of over when I was a kid.
I like Coco.
Yeah, he was great. And
his eulogy for Frankie on YouTube, someone asked him as a joke at like a Q&A, and he actually gave a very 8-minute long poignant thing, and everyone on stage was crying by the end.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really good. So you should look up Coco Beware eulogizes his parrot, Frankie.
That's everybody's homework this week, is to go see that. Well, the first match that is not a dark match it's a tag, 6-man tag, British Bulldog, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Texas Tornado, Kerry Von Erich, defeating Power and Glory and the Warlord, which just the amount of steroids on the heel side, enough to kill a horse. That's
a match, though, that I would say, that's definitely just a hot start popcorn match, because that's, that goes to show you the Vince of I'm just trying to get butts in the seats, pal. I'm just trying to sell buys, pal. Because there's no story going into that. It's like, why is Ricky Steamboat? It's crazy to think about that. Ricky Steamboat and Kerry Von Erich are in a match, but Davey Boy gets to bring it home.
The funny thing about this match,
and also he feuded with the Warlord for like a year. Yeah, he was forever going against the Warlord.
The whole thing feels like we're going to open the show, pal, with the type of bodies that Vince McMahon thinks every professional wrestler should look like. On both sides.
They were doing the World Bodybuilding Federation at the time.
Yeah.
So that was their image, and that was the thing. I think the finish was Davey going over Warlord, I think, with a power slam. And so, it was a high spot to close the match, I think. Yeah. And it was like, but again, just think about that. Like, you have Kerry Von Erich and Ricky Steamboat, and you got your like goddamn, and they're outside brawling with Power and Glory.
Yeah.
To close the match. And then who's in the ring? The Warlord and the British Bulldog.
Yeah.
Okay. Whose music plays after? Davies.
Yeah.
Like,
hey, why? It's one of those hey, why nots.
But man, what a lineup though. And you look at that, that one side of Davey and the Dragon and Kerry Von Erich. I mean, that's some good foresight. Is that I'm sure there was some people. There were some people there, not Bruce, but some people that were saying, "What's the story here?" But I think Vince was just thinking, "You got three legends like in a match, and
three legends, and also
30 years from now, like we're doing, people are going to be like, I can't believe they opened a pay-per-view.
They opened a pay-per-view, and not just legends, but
in their prime,
and also kind of regional stars that you had. Yep. British Bulldog was a British guy, but had been the Northeast for a while. You had Ricky the Dragon
in Stampede.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And then you had Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, big NWA guy, so you've got Crockett territory type of guy. And then you've got Texas Tornado, which is going to be world class, the Texas South, that where you're bringing in audiences.
Yeah, you're right. There is kind of a story there. So I take back what I said. It's like, it's like as a child, I was just like, all right. But yeah, I think that one weirdly, even though it was like you said, look at these guys, look at this muscle match. For fans, if you looked at the subtext of that match, that was cool. That those three guys were united, and it was it's going to be the only time too. So
absolutely, cool. It's kind of a one-off thing, and and that's just the first televised match. The next one, Bret Hart beating Mr. Perfect for the Intercontinental Championship.
Dude, this was like at the time. This was like, I mean, this is one of those matches that they talk about. Because people try to replicate. I mean, it's like there've been so many good matches since working has become, I'd say like it probably about 20 years ago, maybe a little bit more, when you had that influx of like Kurt Angle and the Hardys and Edge and Christian and Jericho, all this that would put on a match. But they all say like one of the matches, everyone's one of their top three. It's either between the one that everyone talks about is like Savage, Steamboat, WrestleMania 3, but Bret Hart, Mr. Perfect at SummerSlam 91. Wow. That was, and that was really a pick'em because Perfect was going over everybody. I mean, they had him knocking guys off that you were really like, it felt like we didn't know he was hurting and we didn't know he had a back injury. But they really hid that well. And you were really like, Perfect might be going with this because you're looking at things and you're saying they only need to have a good match and that'll get Bret over. They just need a good match. Mm-hmm. And we know Hogan's going over in the main event. And for a year now, we've been wondering, is it going to be Hogan, Mr. Perfect? Mm-hmm. And that makes sense because one of Vince's big things is, believe it or not, everyone thinks he has this mentality about it's got to be two big guys against each other. If you look at the high profile big guy matches they've had, they're great workers. It's, you have some, Undertaker's had some rough ones, but it's because he can work. Mm-hmm. He can at least get you through 10 minutes with Giant Gonzalez or Great Khali or just people where you're like, oh my God. But the reason he went against Kane a million times is because they're both athletic. They're both big. They can match each other. And I think that it made sense in my head. I remember watching if I were going to predict, I think what was going to happen, I was like, Hogan's going to go over in the main event. Perfect's going to go over and we're going to have another title versus title match. We're going to have, because Vince loves to have the big guy and then the guy he's chasing. He likes to have a guy like a Mr. Perfect that can get around a little bit quicker. And it's a David Goliath thing because aesthetically and visually, that's a better match. And when you can't have two lugs go against each other forever. It's just people start chanting boring. They're going to hurt each other. So when Bret won the Mr. Perfect match, crazy. And it was like, they did it so well too, where he got the sharpshooter so deep so that Perfect sold the back injury. And you were like, oh, he got hurt in the match. And you're like, no, he was Mr. Perfect. He was just the ultimate pro that was able to go. That was like a 25-minute match. And he hid the injury the whole time and then sold right at the end. so that it made sense that he went away for a while, and
Absolutely.
it was crazy. Like Bret Hart has he said a couple of those is beating Perfect for that title, and then beating Ric Flair for the World Heavyweight Championship.
Yeah,
no one would have had him winning those matches. But Bret was such a great worker that like you're in the moment, and it really did. It was like a miracle on ice sort of thing. You're just like, I can't believe this. And those guys, it was great. Just
that,
like, you know,
absolutely.
So
That's kind of when I became a like Bret Hart fan, was this match, just it being wow. And I still have this. I have a WWF magazine with Bret Hart with the Intercontinental Championship on
yep.
his shoulder. And it's like, that's, I've said this in previous episodes. I had Hulk Hogan was my favorite world championship guy. Mm-hmm. Bret Hart was my favorite intercontinental guy. It's a way to be able to have two favorites, was I break them up and then I'd have the favorite tag team guys. And that would allow me to cheer equally, and not have to pick between the two. Cause I was like, these guys aren't going to go against each other.
I always think Perfect though. Whenever I think Intercontinental Championship, I always think, I know everyone talks about jokingly sort of, but not really. Cause no disrespect to Mr. Ferris, cause he did have the record, or he still does. But it's when I hear Intercontinental Champion, I think Mr. Perfect. Like that's what comes to mind first. Cause he just, he was so good in the ring and so legitimately tough and athletic, and was one of those guys that as a kid, even if you had a feeling it was a work, you knew he could go into business for himself if he wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was always a little bit of that, sort of like with Andre for me, just because Perfect was such a great athlete. But Bret was just as good. And that was what was so intriguing about that match, was, knowing that each guy is going to hold his own. But great match and great story. And, that's Perfect. Just showing every layer he had in being such a, the favored guy going against the underdog and being intimidating and being up so much offense during the match, but then putting him over at the end. And, I don't know what I like Bret a lot, and Bret's opinions seem to change like the weather sometimes in certain things. But I think my guess is my hope is that he he has a take on that match, because I know for me, I was like, that's when I was like, oh, Bret Hart's a big deal when he
absolutely
organically, and it felt so, like, just like, again, like watching Michael Jordan, Charles Barkley, or something like that, like a finals coming down to the last seconds, like, oh man, he pulled it out. And
absolutely,
both guys just being so legitimately drained afterwards, but classic match
for sure.
And tough to have that go second.
That's second match. Yeah, everybody else has to follow it, and we'll I'll just kind of run through the rest of this real quick. But the next match, Natural Disasters, Earthquake, Typhoon, with Jimmy Hart beat the Bushwhackers, and Andre the Giant's like out involved in this.
He's in
thing
the corner,
too.
yeah. Last time we see Andre, on US TV, yeah.
So you got that. The next one, Virgil beating Ted DiBiase for that.
Another one, man. Yeah. People respect Virgil, man. I know people tell their jokes, but that was another one, just like the Bret Hart match, where people remember that was a big moment.
Yeah, and he was over with us, like
big time.
Kids liked him because Ted DiBiase was such a great heel. Virgil was a great babyface against him. It kind of helped propel him to, I think, in our minds as children, of this is the guy I'm rooting for.
You should do that. I think I'd love to hear a Virgil rebook, because
maybe that would be
episode. They could have done. We all bought into him. We all liked him. They could have done a lot more than just made him an enhancer to the stars.
Oh, for sure. Like, this is kind of his peak here.
Should have been his jumping off point.
It should have been, but unfortunately, he's definitely going to have to be an episode, because that certainly was a missed opportunity there. The next match, the Big Boss Man, Mountie, we talked about that a little bit earlier.
That's when the Mountie becomes a comical character. They made the right move where they were like, we got to get out of this as quick as possible.
Yeah, and this is the jailhouse match.
Dude, look, man. I know that Dynamite's wife has her take and all that, but like, man, I love Jacques Rougeau. I just think he's. I just remember I thought that was when he had to become less serious and goofier in that character. I thought he was great. and I think he's great in the documentaries.
Oh,
I
for
think he's
sure.
very self-effacing, very I believe what he says because he's just like, and I love the vignettes they did where he was in the jail and everything, and then the other New York prisoners were talking to him. So no, that
It's
was a
great.
fun match too.
It's
Yep.
great. It's fun, and he was a great character. I'll probably have to do an episode on the Mountie at some point soon too.
Yeah.
Following this, Legion of Doom beat the Nasty Boys.
Big one.
That great. Just like everybody we're mentioning is Hall of Famer, Hall of Famer, Hall of Famer.
And a great blow off match too.
Great one there. And then you've got, just a little breather in between the Legion of Doom and
This is
Hogan.
IRS Greg the Hammer.
It is. And it's, it's a match, and
I'm going to tax your hammer.
yeah, it's something where it's like, but you know what? Even as a kid, it's like, I did not like IRS. He was a villain. Greg Valentine, I had the action figure of him. So it wasn't like it was not meaningful at all. But as an adult, I would love to see this match.
Hey man, and also with IRS, Bray's got to get that money for those puppets somewhere.
Yeah,
that's true. Irwin won that match.
That's true. And then obviously our main event. And so the reason I even bring this all up, just like I said a few minutes ago, is that just imagine, what would you pay to see these guys in their prime right now? Just if we had a time machine to go and see this SummerSlam.
You start at the very back row, $1,000.
Yeah, easily.
You start there, and that's like a single seat with a pole in front of you.
Yeah. It's just all-time greats, just all-time greats,
And it was so hot, and the crowd, like every match was, even the ones with weird stories, they all, Pat, I think Pat was still around at that point. I know he was in and out of there around that period, but, just smart psychology, great event, like in Madison Square Garden.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the reason we even go through this is that this is the last time we see Ultimate Warrior for a little while.
Yeah.
Now, like you alluded to this and actually spoke directly to it earlier, no Undertaker, no Jake the Snake. And I think we should cover Jake the Snake just real briefly before we get into the rebooking. Is, Jake the Snake was, he was this interesting character when we were kids, because I can't think, the best person I can kind of compare him to is Bray Wyatt in today's product, where he could be a babyface or villain-ish. It's kind of like he's always dark, no matter what, whether he has fireflies, in the audience or not.
I'll throw another name at you. Sure. Randy Orton.
Yeah, Randy Orton.
I think at times reminds me a lot of.
Well, he is the Viper.
Yeah, well, that's no, they did stuff together. That's no coincidence. So I don't know if I would put Jake quite. He's halfway between those two.
Yeah,
but he was very sinister organically. But I think more Randy Orton, because he would be the guy setting someone on fire.
Yeah,
and Randy Fiend, I think, would be more like sort of like an Undertaker Warrior cross. That's just my opinion. But in terms of cutting, I would say this: Bray Wyatt. Here's what I'll say: Bray Wyatt, Swamp Bray Wyatt, when he was from the Wyatt family, very Jake Roberts. And he's talked about that there's a lot of Jake Roberts in there.
Absolutely, and that's more of what I'm thinking. I'm not necessarily thinking the Fiend.
Sure. Okay.
The Fiend is, the thing is about Jake Roberts is, yes, I have categories where I kind of say, this is the supernatural wrestlers, Undertaker, Kane, Mankind, in this era, Ultimate Warrior.
Yep. Papa Shango.
Papa Shango.
Shango. Hey, I want to come back and do a Papa Shango one, man.
Oh, absolutely. Papa Shango is one of those guys that, and this is going to take 30 seconds because we got to keep moving here.
Yes,
but Papa Shango is a guy where I'm like, that guy actually scared me as a kid, and then he was just gone.
Horrifying. They had nothing for him. It was a great character with nothing planned out.
Yeah. But it would have been great. Oh, it would have been
programmed with the Undertaker. That's probably why. They were probably like, we never know how it's going to go with Jim, so let's put this guy with him, see if he gets a rub. He didn't, and that was it.
Yeah.
Great character though.
Great character. And so Jake the Snake, he existed in both worlds. He could go up against Macho Man. He could go up against. He could have gone up against Hogan, but he could equally go up against Undertaker, Ultimate Warrior. He can be in both realms. He could be just the wrestler, or he can be a supernatural character too, because he seemed to tap into the dark side, or he's not voodoo like Papa Shango, but there's
No, but
almost an
his
element of that.
psychology, his human psychology was so dark
Mm-hmm.
that it you can never tell what someone else is thinking. And he played that up so well. So Undertaker might be supernatural, but you know what it's going to be. Him coming out of the coffin, or the lights going out,
Mm-hmm.
or something, or the urn. But Jake was just a guy. He was this weird guy that talked very, he had this weird, and I sometimes it's sort of like a Children of the Corn thing, where it's like some of the scariest things happen in broad daylight, so to speak, And Jake to me was one of those guys where it was like he just seems like a guy with a snake and a weird mustache, but he's weird. Like something weird's going on with this guy.
Yeah, yeah, and he's
Like a cult leader. He's like a Charles Manson. That's
he
how I would
is.
describe him.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
a cult leader, or he's able to just tap into a dark psychology that you were not seeing from other wrestlers, even heels of the time.
And
And so
better than other TV, better than actors you would see in primetime dramas or action. He was more believable. Jake was just
easily more
his
believable.
promos were better than anything you'd see on TV.
Absolutely. And that kind of gets us to the rebooking here, because they were clearly going to do a program together.
Mm-hmm.
There's these vignettes, I went back and watched them again,
So
where
good.
it's so interesting, because this almost feels like something that the WWE is doing occasionally now, especially during COVID when they were doing, these are vignettes, but it's not that far off cinematically from
Yeah, it was. That's a good
the
point,
great,
Luke. Yeah,
yeah, the
yeah. This is like
Undertaker.
the first cinematic program
Yeah.
that happened ahead of its time. And as I recall, I know they had John Philpelli. That's who Bruce didn't click with, so he was out of there. But they also had, I think, some Hollywood people come in and do this,
It
and
shows. It shows.
it does. And I know it didn't. I guess it didn't go over great with some of the old school guys, but I mean, Vince didn't care. I mean, everyone has this thing about Vince being out of touch and stuff. And look, if he is now, it's because he's got too many people trying to get their own things across. And it's just like being a teacher in a kindergarten class where at some point you're just going to lose it and be like, everyone shut up. But back then, like when it was a smaller company and the creative team was like 5 people, and you had 3 months to tease things out, play things out, he knew. Like he was like, you know, like Batman was just the big movie. And so we can't keep doing. Let me tell you something, brother. Under the bright lights in the ring, we got to get weird. We got to get dark. And these were just way ahead of their time, and some of the best TV I remember watching as a kid.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
when
Oh,
I first
so
met
good.
Dana and worked with her, one of the first things I said, I was just like, your husband was. This is one of my earliest memories of TV. Is just like these. This was so weird and that it was on at 11 in the morning where I grew up, and they had him doing all sorts of things. And then when they got to the snake pit, I remember watching that with my dad. He was home, he wasn't flying at the time, and him and I watching that, and he got swerved by the end. I remember him going, whoa, at the
Yeah.
end, when they did the reveal. And I had to ask him, like, was that the Undertaker? And then we talked about it during the commercial, because he was just trying to humor me, like me into it. But he knew Taker from flying him a couple times just on commercial on Delta, and
Hmm.
so he was kind of into the Undertaker just because he was a nice guy. He didn't tell me that, because even Dad keep it kayfabe, kayfabe at the time. But
That's a good
he
dad.
yeah, he's a Navy guy, so he understands. And so
Top secret.
exactly. And so I just said, is Jake with the Undertaker now? And he's like, I think that's what just happened. And it was like you had to see it back. It wasn't like now where you could go on Twitter and be like, this just happened, or look it up. And I think when they came back, they just went to the next match. I'm like, what just happened? And then they kept going. So it was a very like, whoa, like sort of moment. And it was very well done. And you're right. At that point, it was like, okay, we're going from Warrior Undertaker because they weren't clicking in the ring, I guess, which was a common thing with Warrior, I guess. But they knew Jake could do, he could work with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we're going to Warrior Jake because Undertaker was getting too big. Like they were like, you can't, he's going to have to do the honors. He can't. So you got to put him in a program where he can go over. And it was like, okay, Warrior Jake, this is cool. I like this.
Absolutely. So we need to start talking about how to rebook this from this point on,
so
from
Jake,
these vignettes.
We have the vignettes, and the reason I reached out to you, I was like, we got to talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
Is that Jake? We all knew that thing about the storyline they were going to have. Jake claims, and no one has disputed this, to my knowledge, at least publicly. I think Jake said he was promised that he was going to do a championship program, The Ultimate Warrior. And I said this to you, and I said, I don't understand this because Hogan must pose at this point. Hogan's the champion. And, it's like he's just unbeatable. And so how do you get the belt? Sorry, Mr. McMahon. How do you get the title or championship? We don't say a belt. Belt's a piece of clothing. Title. How do you get the title onto either Warrior or Jake to start that program? Because you got to take it off Hulk somehow. And so I'm interested to hear your theory because I'm just looking at this and I'm like, boy, we're missing some links here. Like as far as how do you do this storyline?
Yes. Clearly, if you're going to be having a championship going back and forth between Warrior and Jake,
or just Jake going for it. That's all. That's what he was promised. Because either way, you make the same money if you're in
right. So either way, the championship has to be on one of these two guys.
And there's going to be Warrior, yeah.
And so just kind of looking over the list of champions, so Hogan is the champion at this time, at SummerSlam time. But he gets beat by Undertaker for the championship at Survivor Series.
With interference.
Now, that's something where, and then Hogan wins it back, right?
With interference.
The
urn, yeah.
Right. And then it gets vacated and then Ric Flair gets it. But the thing is, I wonder if, I don't, obviously no inside information here, but I wonder if it was like Undertaker gets it from Hogan and then Warrior takes it from Undertaker after that instead of Hogan getting it back. Because that would put it on him.
Texas would be Warrior going against Undertaker.
Yes.
And Hulk wouldn't be on the card because he was quote unquote injured.
Right.
I love that story too. People can look that up. I'm not going to tell that story again. But yeah. Hulk milked a few thousand out of that one. But no, that's
brother.
That if okay. So yeah, you'd have the Warrior. I like that. Yeah. So you'd have the Warrior and Tuesday in Texas. Mm-hmm. Do you even need to have them at Tuesday in Texas? Could you just do Warrior Undertaker at the Royal Rumble with the championship on the line and have the Warrior go over?
Well,
where does Jake come in? Would he be? Oh, he'd have to be at the Rumble. Rumble would have to be Jake versus the Warrior. So you have to be Warrior Taker at Tuesday in Texas, Warrior Jake.
Yes, and or there is also this possibility, is if we back up a step, that instead of this weird SummerSlam match with Hogan and Slaughter, that Hogan goes against Undertaker at Survivor Series, wins it there, and then you have Warrior and Undertaker at Survivor Series instead of, it's a little murkier since we've got the Undertaker Warrior feud still going on, and you still kind of were finishing up that Hogan Slaughter stuff. Mm-hmm. But that would get it where you don't need a Tuesday in Texas unless, I don't remember the whole story about Tuesday in Texas, whether it was something that had to be done, that they were trying to create a new thing. And so they were going to do it anyway. If so, you could have Warrior, getting the title from Undertaker there.
Yeah, I think from what I heard, it was them trying to. They hadn't lined up, and they were just trying something new. But allegedly, a lot of what went on there was Taker being punished for allegedly injuring Hogan and taking the punishment. But then he saw
Yeah.
the replay from the zoomed in HD angle and saw that Hogan was just being Hogan. And so, but I remember it was like a chaotic thing. It was like there was a chaotic schmaz finish at Survivor Series. We have to make this right somehow. I didn't get the Tuesday in Texas. A lot of my friends did. That did very well. I remember, at least in my area, a lot of people got that one because I heard what happened the next morning. But yeah, I think what you would do is Warrior would probably challenge Undertaker. But who does the Warrior? Okay, but here's my question. So Warrior and Jake, so they would just be like regular Survivor Series teams. You'd have Okay, well, let's look coming out of SummerSlam. You'd have Warrior going up against Jake. Then you'd have you'd stay with Hogan, Undertaker. What's Randy doing? Is he just kind of still doing commentary?
Randy, I don't even have to worry about him right now. He's
he felt like a fill-in for Warrior a little bit.
Right, because I feel like Warrior leaving and having the issues that he's got creates issues with everybody else in the lineup. All the rest of the card is like you start having to shift things around at the top, bring in somebody.
Maybe they do the Ric Flair Elizabeth thing to kick Ric Flair off.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
When he first comes in,
for sure.
With him, because everyone knew at the time that behind the closed doors that marriage was coming to an end. So maybe that's a way to naturally do that, and also have Rick get a hot start.
That's great because he's not going to win the championship at Royal Rumble. It's not going to be vacated.
Well, no, you'd have him win the Rumble. So you'd have at the Rumble, you'd have your main event or your title match would be Ultimate Warrior, Jake the Snake. Warrior goes over. And then this is where I think, because now it's starting to make sense, because Flair has always had a certain amount of animosity for the Warrior, which makes sense. But I think that probably in the Rumble, Flair has to win that. That was such a great. You keep that the same, and I think that you don't need him to win the championship to get as over as he did with Northeast fans in that Rumble. All you got to do is have him coming in third like he did. Maybe have him come in first so that's a bigger story. And he goes the distance, wins the Rumble. You can still do your schmaz with Sid Justice and Hogan, get them into a program. And then you would have going to Mania 8, you would have Warrior versus Flair, and but right away, that's a problem. That's one where on a Saturday night's main event, you might need to change course a little bit. You'd have Warrior, Flair, but again, the NWA star of the 80s versus the face in the 90s, and then you'd have Hogan, Sid. So that's you're kind of sticking it to the Southerners, because you're like, we got your two boys in our two main events, which they did anyway. And then maybe the question then is I think you could probably still get to Jake and Undertaker. And so the thing is, you just have to find something for Macho Man to be doing at WrestleMania 8. And
well, this is what I would do with WrestleMania 8, at least based on some of the course that we're kind of going on. I would have Jake and Warrior still feuding at WrestleMania 8. So we've got, because they're so good, the story's so rich, and you've got so much that can go on there. You can have dark side stuff going on. And so what do I do with Hogan? This is the thing. If you've got Warrior there, Warrior being able to headline WrestleMania with Jake the Snake, or at the very least co-headline, be a very big prominent match, get a lot of eyeballs there. You don't have to fear having Hogan versus Flair. You can now have Hogan Flair because it's not all on that match.
That's a good call.
Yeah.
Maybe they both go. Maybe they pull the Luger Hart finish where
Yeah.
they both go over. Oh man, that would have been cool. Like the '92 Rumble to me was perfect, but like that would have been an interesting. I would have bought that a tie like a Hogan Flair,
Yeah.
and that way you could have had Hogan's going away match, and Flair, he has the ultimate respect for Hogan, and Hogan thinks Flair's the greatest of all time. They would have worked together
For sure.
and so you could have done. So Jake seemed like he was holding back still a little bit of something. He was really hot. He was really mad at Warrior. I mean, I thought he showed a great deal of compassion and was very good in that documentary and was maybe one of the more fair people. And just because he got it, he understands what goes on with wrestlers, where some of these other people were just crapping on this person, but like, or just talking trash about this person. But I think, you could have Hogan. You could have Warrior go over. Maybe that gets you back into Warrior Undertaker for another summer, where somehow you'd have Undertaker. I've said this to you before. I thought they turned him too soon. I would have loved to have seen Undertaker open that show in Indy as a heel in the first match and go against someone like Sarge, someone that you're like, well, this guy's never been manhandled, and have him just wreck him one last time. But you could have Warrior go over Jake, and you could have Hogan pose. You could have him go over Flair on the way out the door.
Absolutely.
And
to me, this is where Warrior gets the title back, because I would love to see that feud where Jake gets the title from him, maybe at Royal Rumble, because we have Warrior getting it at Tuesday in Texas. We'll just put it at that spot. But then he can keep it till Royal Rumble. Jake gets it through some sort of either supernatural or interference, or Undertaker helps.
That's where you have Flair interfere. You'd have him interfere because he's thinking. It's weird how you get to it though, because he's thinking, well, you still have to have the winner of the. Here's the problem though: you still have to have the winner of the Rumble go against. But that's the thing: if no one wins, if they tie, if Flair comes out and says, because his thinking is, it's easier for me to go against Jake, the Ultimate Warrior. It's better for my style. So he helps. So they do what they did in '91. He comes out and does the scepter thing, whatever his version of it is.
Yeah. The big gold belt. He takes the Real World's Championship.
Yes.
Hits him over the head with it.
And ditches that, like when a sign of arrogance, like I'm not going to need this anymore. And then in the Rumble, he and Hogan go out over the same time. Jack Tunney, the president, of course, comes on and says, because there was a tie, these two individuals are going to compete at WrestleMania. But the problem there would be, wouldn't they be competing to be the number one contender? And is there a world where what you'd really love to do is you'd love to get to Wembley, because you're going to have Brett Davey close. But man, if you could have in that stadium a Hulk Warrior match, and Warrior would have to go over again. But the problem is, everyone always says like they had to get Hulk off TV because of the steroid trial and stuff, but they had Warrior on TV. So it's like, I think that like, really, I think what I would have loved to have seen is, Hogan Flair in the tiebreaker, and Hogan goes over, and then Warrior goes over Jake, wins it back, and then they go to SummerSlam, and it's Hogan Warrior Part 2. And also, and then that's what headlines that. And then you could do, but you have to have something for Flair. You still got Sid Justice to play with, so you could have a Flair Sid Justice thing. That could be an interesting program. Like, to kind of, that'd be a real good. That's a Vince move, man, to rub salt in the wounds of the guys down south. Is we're gonna take your two guys and put them in a program up. There are guys now.
And
So
they've got history. Obviously, Vince is not going to acknowledge the history of Sid being part of the Four Horsemen at all or anything like that. But there is, Ric Flair can allude to those things like, big man, I know all of your tricks. I'm the one that broke you into this business. I'm the one that showed you everything. Do one of those classic moves, the cliche move, where it's like, I taught you everything you know, but I didn't teach you everything I knew.
right, and also, man, if there's a way to get Sid to not go play softball for a while,
Yeah.
it's say, hey, man, you're going to be on the card with Rick, on some of these shows. And you're our guys now. We've built you up. Sid, I would see being maybe, and then we talked about Papa Shango, and again, another problem they have with Papa Shango was great character that they just never had anyone with. Maybe that becomes Sid's program at some point. Maybe you make Sid sort of like a more endearing Ryback who just goes over everybody and everybody and everybody, and then in comes the voodoo guy. And now he's got to go against him. Maybe you have Sid go against the Undertaker, and that becomes the big thing.
That's obviously that's big man versus big man, and
maybe you do Rick versus. They finally got to this in 2002, and they both talked about how they were like, "Man, we've been wanting to do this forever," but maybe you turn Undertaker, and in the summertime instead of the Kamala thing, which did not age well. Maybe because. Yeah, well, anyway, you'd have Undertaker as the baby face going against Ric Flair. And then that answers that, dude, that match in 92, if you had Undertaker and Ric Flair flying around the ring, and that answers Vince's call to, if there's a guy in the ring who's running around and high flying, who's going to catch him? Undertaker's going to catch him.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have Mr. Perfect on the outside with Flair, you have Paul Bearer on the outside with Undertaker. Yeah, I think that it's just a lot went wrong. I mean, that's just, this is really, there's been a lot of talk. There's a lot of NBA stuff where people say that, like, this is a seminal moment. And some of it's sad, tragic, like Len Bias.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of it's just like circumstantial, like, Jordan's quote unquote retirement, whether he did retire the first time or the suspension or whatever, and how it altered history and what we didn't get to see. And I feel like this Warrior SummerSlam moment, they did an okay job because, like we said, the 92 Rumble was the best of all time.
Greatest
without the Warrior.
All time,
I mean, that's an achievement. And then at the same time, 8 I thought was decent. We've rebooked it, we've talked about it, but it was fun. It left them smiling. People went home with a smile, as Vince would say, and we all remember it. Had a couple great matches. But, I think a lot of, we just named them. I think that Sid, I think Papa Shango, I think Jake, obviously, because he left. Hogan had a weird end. I mean, it was a botched run-in by Shango. That was his go away at the time. That wasn't cool. And It's just, I really feel like those were all offshoots of having a key guy in place who was going to work this program so that you didn't have to have Charles Wright in his first ever pay-per-view shot do a run-in the Hoosier Dome. I love when people give him a hard time about that. I'm like, you know what? Why don't you time running out from that far away and getting into the ring and see how you do? Why don't you try being the person to tell someone when you're running a football field, like, into the ring. You don't know when someone's going to slip. You don't know if someone's going to go home too soon. It's Hogan. And it's Hogan and Sid. They weren't working great together. So, but I think I look at the Warrior, and when I heard Jake say that, and now that we just talked through, I'm like, they were pretty good. They did it. They were hanging on there for a while in 92. But I do think that the reason the reason we got the Ultimate Warrior throwing up because of Papa Shango, the reason we got Kamala and the Undertaker's goofy thing, the reason we got these other goofy gimmicks, like weirdly Shawn Michaels and Rick Martel against each other, even though there's no one, like, who are you rooting for? It was when I went back and rewatched that, I was like, oh yeah, the face thing. Like,
don't hit them in the face.
Yeah,
they're too pretty.
But I was like, the reason you have all these goofy things and Sergeant Slaughter and Hacksaw and stuff is like, I think it was just, everyone was playing out of position because they were like, we just lost our number 2 guy. Everyone has to move up a slot. Some people pulled it off, like Brett. And then there were some people, most people didn't, just because it was chaos. And I thought they did a really good job balancing all those interweaving storylines with Flair, Jake, and Undertaker on one side, and Hogan, Piper, and Savage on the other. But it just got to be a mess. And it just got to be, and then you had Brett and a contract. There was too much going on. And then I think it was just, you look at what they were up against without various allegations and contract. It was just like, and you lost Andre unexpectedly from active wrestling. I mean, I think quicker than they thought he was going to be in the 91 Rumble, and he wasn't. They did the best they could, but it's like we said, that was like a sports team on its last legs. That it was like the 80s roster kind of on its last legs and missing a really key cog. But I really would have loved to have seen that story that could have happened with Undertaker and Jake. And man, a Jake title run, the idea of that "trust me" music, and then he comes out with the belt.
Oh yes,
around his his shoulder, or he sleazily kind of puts it around his waist and touches it.
I think he puts it in the bag with the snake so no one can take it.
I love that. Oh, dude, that is the best.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's what he does at the end of the match, and
yeah,
that's what it's all about. And then I think it's like, just imagine that. Like, imagine as a kid, you're like, that's, and then I could just hear Vince saying, like, look at this man. Look at this disgraceful human being.
Oh, yeah.
He is a snake. He's a champion. Disgusting. And then, over on Wrestling Challenge, and, well, what are you going to do, Monsoon? This is, Jake's the smartest man in the business, except for Ric Flair. And when those two get in the ring at WrestleMania, well, I don't know. So I'm so sure about that. But that's a dream match too. And you're thinking, like, what if it is Jake versus Ric Flair?
Yeah.
And as a kid, you're like, do I like Jake again? Yeah, man. It's a shame. And it's really, that's the thing with the Warriors. I urge everybody, if they haven't yet, I know everyone watched the Dark Side one and they've seen the Destruction video. We've seen all the stuff about Warrior, the downfall stuff, but check out the A&E one, because I think it gives you more backstory to how he got there. And I think it also tells you more about who he was later in life.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a theory, and it's sensitive to say this, and I don't know that anyone ever knows this, but that promo on Raw, every man breathes his last breath, and he died the next day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he did not look good, but it makes you wonder. We all want to. It's like, whether we want to believe it or not, we all want to leave this earth or whatever in a way we love, or a way that's respected, or a way that's honorable. And there was like a very Mickey Rourke wrestler like vibe. And that was after that movie came out. And you wonder if when Jim was in that ring, he was like, I might go. Like, I might have a heart attack right here on Monday Night Raw, but I'm going to get this promo out. And I think it was in that moment, you could see him catching up on all those programs, like the one with Jake, the one he could have had with another run with Hogan and WWF and stuff, and just the missed opportunities, and just being like, well, I'm gonna live it all right here and lay it out. But he was supposed to be the guy. He was the guy in the 90s, and to have him on top and Brett as IC, that's tough, man, and makes you wonder, do we have an NWO? Do you need to go get Scott Hall? Do you need to do all that stuff? And I'm glad the Warriors getting a lot of, because I know you and I are both huge fans of the character.
I still have my Ultimate Warrior wrestling buddy.
Yes, of the character.
I have Hogan too. Now don't get it twisted. I got Hogan, but I also have Warrior.
Well, with Hogan, I don't know if I'm as big a fan of the character. Definitely not. I'll say this. I don't mean to bury my former employer, but there's a clip. Someone did an edit of Hogan and Titus coming out to host WrestleMania. It went viral on Twitter. That was very funny, and just kind of summed up how most people, myself included, kind of feel about Terry. But
Well, I
But
don't have any opinions on Terry Bollea here. Let's not. I am talking strictly Hulk Hogan.
yeah, but
I separate the two.
the warrior character with the tassels and the music and just the not knowing what he's all about. He's just so cool. And yeah, that felt like something that was going to go on until 95, 96.
For
And
sure.
he was the guy in the 90s. And so, yeah, when business slumped and things went down. And yeah, he was supposed to be our guy. And it's a shame. And it really would have been great to see. And it robbed Jake. I mean, Jake talked about it, and you get it. That would have been his at that point. That would have been his peak. That would have
His
been his,
peak, and he
his,
wouldn't have
his
been. I mean, he left in like '92 for
Yep, that
WCW.
would have
So
been
it's like,
his, because he never had, other than the Rick Martel blind thing, he never had like a real compelling story. And I think this one with the Warrior was going to be, as he said, it was going to be the one where he buys his beach house off of, and this is the one you're known for. And he never got that run. He never got that because the guy wasn't there. And
yeah,
there was the Savage one was weird because he had to have Elizabeth, which he didn't want to do, and then the Taker one was weird because we all knew it was going to happen. I mean, I guess he did okay, but it's too bad.
he was right on the cusp.
Seminal program for both wrestlers, and we never got it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, as we're wrapping this up here, just to reflect on what void was left when the Warrior departed, is that it shifted everything around. And Hogan wasn't long for this wrestling world either. He was going to be taking a break. He needed a break. The audience needed a break. And so
yeah, when he got eliminated at the Rumble in '92, everyone cheered.
Yeah, right. And so
you edited it out, but yeah,
right. And he needed a breather, and for lots of reasons. You can't run that hard at the top for that long without needing to just say, I need to step away for a few. Yeah. Do a movie, do whatever.
Almost a decade. Yeah.
Almost a decade. Yeah. He needed to do some Mr. Nanny and stuff like that. And so having that just, it fills out the card. It allows Hogan to be able to go and maybe refresh himself and come back, and allows him to have a program with like Ric Flair, to not have to be the one that carries everything for another year or two because, Warrior's gone.
Yeah. It just is, what's he going to do? Let me tell you something, brother.
Yeah. Yep. And so,
and that's great. And when you have like you said, when you have a break from it, it becomes fun again.
Yeah.
But it's just that, I mean, after Undertaker, they were gonna do, and this is another one you should think about. They were gonna do Hogan Giant Gonzalez, which I can, that's an ultimate, and then the belt. Like I can only imagine oh my god, like there you go, Pat, put that one together, and he probably would have. He would have figured something out. But my god, but after Undertaker, I guess Yokozuna, but we knew he was going over. Yeah, you're out of people at that point. You're like, how many guys can this guy body slam? And then it got to a point where it's like you can't body slam him anymore.
Yeah,
he's not getting him up over his shoulder, and if he does, you're wrecking his back.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, they need it, and then the Warrior was going to be that guy, man. And but like I said, you think of all the things we were into at the time, and the main one being like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That's Warrior. That's the '90s 10-year-old thing. And Vince had it right. Like everyone gives him a hard time and says, man, what was he thinking around with the Warrior? Because if the Warrior did what Vince thought he was going to, like if he just did half the business he was supposed to do in the ring, which was all they needed, and he and Vince didn't have that falling out, which it's not all one person's fault. There's probably Vince said there were some promises he wasn't able to keep. And, and part also, he's selling Warrior. I don't have the money and stuff. And then he's opening the bodybuilding federation. So, Jim's looking at that saying, well, oh, really? You don't have the, We've all been through that where your boss says, I can't give you a raise. And they pull up in a new Corvette. You go,
yeah, but, for sure.
It's like the Warrior was the right call for who they had. And it's like, if they just could have gotten through 91 and into a smoother place, or got, and because by the time he came back in mid '92, it was too late. Like, and everyone was skeptical. They didn't know if it was really him. And he didn't have Sid left, and Shango wasn't ready. It was too late. But if they'd been able to keep it going, Warrior, we'd have had a much different, I think we would have had a lot more cool vignettes like the ones we talked about. And I urge people to go on YouTube and look them up because they never did anything like that again until Mankind, really, in like '96. So it was like a 5-year gap, of just, it was just ring stuff until all of a sudden another dark character showed up. So, but yeah, it could have gotten, it was ahead of its time, only out of circumstance, but it could have worked. It could have been great. And maybe business would have been up. Maybe they would have not had that dip in '92, '93.
It very well could have been because you would have had Warrior. You might have had a refreshed Hogan. Maybe he could have turned heel even at some point. You could have
Yeah.
Jake Roberts sticking around because he's
Yep.
not, he's now at the top of the card.
You never know
You,
where he's going to go. He's your Orton. He's back and forth. He's the
absolutely.
cleaner.
You've got that. You've got Ric Flair coming in. You still
Flair might
kind
stick
of,
around.
yeah,
Flair might stick around. If I mean, if he can draw, if you got, put him in a thing with Jake, or later in the year or something. You got Savage, but it was just everyone was out of position. Everyone
right.
was just playing a role that wasn't theirs, and it showed. I mean, it was all just like, because, and that's, I think, and the positive. Bruce always says, take control of the moment to make it work for you, and I think that the positive that came out of it was Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, in that they, on the mid card and the intercontinental scene, those Bret in particular got himself over. Like, he wasn't, they didn't know what they were going on the upper card. He had great matches, and so something good did come out of it. And Vince made another good call there, because at the time they had the Warrior back, but they knew it wasn't working. And I think he made a great call with Bret Hart. And people, that, imagine the balls to have to do that you would make Bret Hart, who just lost the IC title, you have him go over Ric Flair, on a non-televised match that they have to like show in a primetime wrestling like later on, and get it right. And he's Bret Hart. He's a legend. So much so, and I'm sure Vince was thinking that in Montreal in '97, just that, like, God, I'm gonna have to, I'm gonna do this to this guy after like taking such a big swing and being right, and I'm gonna I'm gonna undo it all. And but it's like, I'll just say that I think that it's unfortunate they didn't get along. It's unfortunate that it's just like any job, that other people's contracts become public and people get jealous. Because I think Warrior was the right call. I know that's an unpopular opinion, but I was the audience, just like you. We were the fans, and we're the consumers. And I'm saying he was over with us. We liked him. And, I think that the problem was they didn't think through, how are we going to work together? And it didn't work out. And it's a real shame.
Well, that's all changed today. On the podcast today, we have changed history. Now it all works out in the head.
World, Jake had a title run, man. And it was great. And he threw that title. That's, Luke, I got to tell you, that's an idea. If you brought that, I think if you brought that up in a meeting, you'd get that's cool. Take the pencil out, and you'd see Bruce start to write, because like he knows it's in. That would have been, really, really fun. And then, like you said, you could have, you could have had the really two storylines. You could have had the Bret Hart trek of all him and all his challengers, and you could have had Warrior and Hogan, and it could have been great. You could have done a brand split back then, maybe.
Hey, well, now the company has a whole lot of options now that we've changed history here. I
just want to say on the record, I hope by the time people hear this that Bray Wyatt's back on TV, because
I hope so too.
Every like on a regular basis, because every time that's, I think a lot of that has to do with crowds being back and the dramatic effect. But we need to see Bray. Hope Keith Lee is okay. It sounds like he's going to AEW, but I'd love to see Aleister Black find a way back into WWE. And it sounds like they're getting Becky back pretty soon too. So, I think there's potential, but we do need we're missing that thing. We do need another, what I like to call a scroll stopper, which is a person where you see them and go, who is that?
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, I gotta see who this character is. And I don't know that Beyond the Fiend that exists in any company right now because they're trying to keep it real. But you need someone like that, and then you need an organic moment. You need you need a Montreal Screwjob, or you need a butts in the seats, something where someone backs into a great angle where you get the Mr. McMahon character sort of thing. And I think when it happens, everything's business is going to come back. But hey, man, hats off to all the fans and you guys and you doing this podcast. But Tony and Vince to keep anything going. I know they've made tons of mistakes along the way. Everybody has. We all have during this pandemic. But man, I thought wrestling I was like, they're done. Like, I was like, this is just not going to work out.
They survived.
They're going
to thrive.
So. I hope that everyone that lost their spot gets a spot back somewhere and comes back, because we need it. We need the fun. We need the escape. I want to have something fun to talk about on Tuesday mornings again.
Absolutely. Well, to put a button on that is everyone listening here, to find out when The Fiend will be returning, just go with your mom to the grocery store and to the magazine aisle and check out Pro Wrestling Illustrated and the other aftermags and see what it says. Jon, thank you for being on the show this week.
Thank you for having me, Luke. This is so much fun.
Absolutely. And I want everyone to listen to your podcast. Here's what people are talking about. You're the co-host on there, the tag team partner, as I said before. Check it out. It's an incredibly interesting show where Jon gets to just talk.
Yeah, we just someone sends in a topic and says, what happened with the Trump hair tussle? And I say, well, this is what I know about it. And so I think we're doing a season 2, and we're going to do one about when I worked at WWE. That we didn't get to this time around. We thought we were going to do like 8 episodes. We did 14, and we had to shelve a lot because of requests. So we're going to do probably the correspondence dinner. We're probably going to do the WWE one. We're going to do doing stand-up on TV one, stuff like that. Yeah, so it's just like if you work in TV or if you want to hear about it, it's basically I'll be honest, we're just ripping off Bruce and Conrad. That's total, no, I'm serious. That's all we're doing. But it's a good plan. But by over time, we've kind of, he was a former student. We've known each other, so it's taken on its kind of its own dynamic, and it's fun, and that we don't see it eye to eye there on a lot of things. So if you listen to the first Tonight Show episode, it gets hot. Ben and I get pretty. I thought it was going to be smooth sailing, a feel good, and we went at it pretty good over one bit. So if anyone wants to hear a sampler of us debate a very famous Fallon bit and take surprising sides on it. It's not who you'd think would be babyface and heel. Go check out the first Tonight Show episode and get to like the hour point, and man, we let it rip. We heard from people the next day being like, "You guys all right?" And I was like, "It's like, well, I mean, I think so, but we agreed loudly to disagree." But today, I think we agreed, Luke.
Well, we agreed, but now we all have to go listen to that episode, go to the hour mark just to hear that argument.
And listen to the WWE on Fallon one, too. That's another, I talk about when The Undertaker tombstone to Turkey, and when Triple H threw Jimmy through a desk, and just hanging out with and email, negotiating this spot between Vince. I was literally between Vince and Jimmy. One wanted to do it one way, the other wanted to do it the other. And I mean, good luck. I don't, that's one of those things I look back on and you're just like, how did I not just fall out the window? But I guess in the moment you're just like, okay, well, like I know how to talk to each person here a little bit, but yeah, it's interesting. So go listen to the WWE on Fallon. That's a fun one too. And it's, love for both.
Absolutely. And also everyone follow Jon at Rinemania on Twitter.
Bristol, Tennessee, baby. July 30th and 31st at Blue Tower I think that's what it's called. Well, anyway, the new club in Bristol.
There we go.
It's run by Sean Carter. Gonna be there 30th and 31st. So I gotta start working out sometime soon. So
sounds perfect. You guys can go see him live soon.
Back to work, Luke, man.
Back to work. The world is open up, and so are we.
Thank you for having me, Luke.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. Do you agree with our booking? Would you do it differently? Well, I'm at Comedian Luke on all social media platforms, and you can actually at Rebooking TT on Twitter and Rebooking the Territory on Facebook. You can also find out about future episodes there. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and please give us a 5-star review. It truly helps.